Let's take a look at characteristics of life now. The 9 characteristics of life are cells and organization, energy and metabolism, reproduction, heredity, homeostasis, growth and development, response to stimuli. Notice that that's response to stimuli. A stimulus is not a characteristic of life. It's the responding, the reacting to a stimulus, something that causes a reaction. Last 2 are needs water and exchanges gas. Number 20, define homeostasis. Homeostasis is the maintenance of a constant internal environment, or keeping all things the same inside the body. Metabolism is the sum total of all chemical reactions in the body. Number 22, why isn't movement a characteristic of life? Now, movement isn't a characteristic of life because not all living things move. If there's a characteristic that a living thing doesn't have, it can't be a characteristic of life. All living things have to have that characteristic. Now, I get a lot of students who say, because there are non-living things that move. And non-living things can have a lot of the characteristics of life, but because they're missing even one characteristic, then they're not considered living. So, movement isn't a characteristic of life because not all living things move. Number 23 is pretty similar. Why isn't eating a characteristic of life? Because not all living things eat. Plants make their own food. They don't eat. And so therefore, eating would fall under the category of energy and metabolism, but eating itself is not a characteristic of life. Now let's move on to chemistry. So first we've got macromolecules. Define a monomer. Now, macromolecules are large molecules, so a monomer is a single, that's what mono means, one, building block. So monomer is a single building block. A polymer is a long chain of many monomers. So the monomers or the building blocks of proteins are amino acids. The monomers of carbohydrates are monosaccharides. The monomers of nucleic acids are nucleotides. And lipids aren't considered polymers because they don't have a repeating monomer, so the building blocks of lipids are glycerol and fatty acids. Now, the jobs of carbohydrates are to store energy and to provide structure. The job of nucleic acid is to store genetic information. The jobs of lipids, exactly like carbohydrates, but done in a different way, they also store energy, they also provide structure. Now, proteins have 4 jobs. Proteins speed up reactions, specifically those are enzymes. Proteins transport materials, so for example, the transport proteins in the cell membrane. They provide structure. And the last one is they send signals, such as hormones. So 2 examples of proteins, I just gave you several. Hormones, enzymes, transport proteins in the cell membrane. 2 examples of carbohydrates, glucose, lactose. 2 examples of nucleic acids, DNA and RNA. And 2 examples of lipids. Those would be fats, oils. And now let's get into enzymes. So an enzyme is a molecule that speeds up reactions. Substrates are the molecules that enzymes work on. Denature occurs when the enzyme is unfolded. Denaturing is not breaking down the enzyme. You do not break the bonds between the amino acids. It only breaks the bonds that hold the fold. So denaturing is only unfolding the enzyme. And the last question, what types of conditions denature enzymes? So that would be high and low pH, high temperature. Low temperature does not denature enzymes, only high temperature. And salinity, so a high amount of salt. And what types of conditions speed up enzyme activity? Increasing the enzyme concentration or increasing the substrate concentration.